Welcome everybody to our webinar, Driving 2 times More Qualified Traffic to Your Website. My name is Barb Sheehan. I'm a marketing manager here at Claritas, and I'm excited to be your host for today's presentation. I'm going to turn the webinar over to our expert, Patrick Acosta.
Hello, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great afternoon. It's sunny here in North Carolina. I'm Patrick Acosta. I've been here at Claritas for 6 years. I oversee the automotive vertical. Prior to coming to Claritas, I've had a very exciting career where I spent 20 plus years in the advertising world, specifically in the media world. And I also spent client side at AT&T and some other brands. And I've been here, like I said, at Claritas for 6 years. And my passion is consumers from day one, and it's been a few years since day one. My passion has been around understanding my clients' consumers and how to understand and target them better. So that's just a little bit about my background. Oops. There we go. But 3 things about me that aren't work related is I love the outdoors, camping, fishing, anything. I love to do it, and I do it with my 2 kids all the time. My wife is more of a glamping type person, but she'll come out once in a while. I love to cook, and I also love to make TikTok. So I combine those 2 things, those 2 passions. But that's just a little bit about me before I jump into the content. Now, we've got about 30 minutes of content and then Q&A session just to set that up a little bit. I've been blessed in my career. I've been able to work with just some amazing brands and a lot of really amazing verticals. And one of the things, or one of the biggest mistakes that I see most brands make, is not spending enough time understanding who's buying and is going to buy their product. And that's what we're really going to focus on a lot today. Because I don't know about you, but some of my days feel like this, right? Where I'm on a hamster wheel and I'm working those legs really quick and getting a lot done. But sometimes I ask myself the question is, am I doing everything I can to understand my consumer? And if I'm not, are those activities really getting me to where I need to go? Some of the other things that some of the misses I see from brands are, for example, not focusing every dollar against those households. Once you've identified who's buying your products, or your vehicles especially, you want to not only make sure that they stay, but you want to go out and find other buyers like them. And every marketing dollar, and those marketing dollars are precious these days, should be focused on those consumers and then the next best consumer after them. And then also testing new technology. Now, you don't need to allocate all your budget to new technology, but if you're not testing 1 or 2 pieces of new technology, you're missing out on invaluable learning. Sometimes you may think, hey, this needs a little bit of time to mature, or hey, we found something really cool using this technology. Let's pour a little bit more fuel on it and see how it works. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the new technology that's out there, specifically AI, later in the presentation. And through my experience is if you focus on your consumer and you test new technology and you focus all those efforts on that, you'll see twice as much or 2x better results than when you don't. And so really the question that I want you guys to be thinking about today is, are we doing this today? As I walk you through some of the examples, some of the capabilities on how to drive more people to your website or to your dealers, I want you to think, are we doing this, or could we be doing it better today? And so today I'm going to focus on EVs as an example. Right now, 23% of US households are buying 67% of EVs. That's an enormous number. And they're also buying 37% of new vehicles, right? So it's fairly concentrated, right? Buying a lot. And so if you think about the 127 million households out there, and only, was that, I said 23% are buying EVs, right? There's a lot of room for mistake, right? Because I don't care how big your budgets are, 23, you can't cover all 127 million households. And so you really want to be able to identify, these households and who's buying these vehicles. Now, if we just take a step back for a second and understand where the category is right now, for example, the EV category is still in that early adopter phase. We'll talk about those early adopters here in a second. But in the next 2 to 4 years, right, we're going to see new buyers come into the market. So right now, you're trying to sell vehicles off of your lot and trying to move them, but I know we're all planning, looking 2 to 3 years ahead and understand, who is the next buyer once we get past this early adoption phase. So let's talk about EV buyers for a second. So the EV buyer looks like your traditional early adopter, 52 years old, male, married, and a very high household income. And these early adopters make up 51% of all EV buyers. So these early adopters are really important. You can see they're about 12% of U.S. households, and they're 4 times more likely to purchase an EV. So really important. Some of their attitudinal data behind them is that they're very eco-friendly. That lifestyle and that attitude is really important to them. They like the latest technology and they love to travel. And me being a cat person is painful to see, but they're dog people. They're dog people. So, and these are just, interesting and good insights to have as you're thinking about, your brand or what you're trying to do. I don't know who everyone is on the webinar today, but if you're, for example, in marketing and in the creative area, for example, trying to produce the right messaging, these type of nuggets are really important. Going more around the demographics and things like that might be important, for example, for like dealership location or analysis of why your dealership is doing well and why it might not be doing well. When we get into some of the buying behavior, obviously things like fuel type and mileage are really important to them. And then we see that environmentally or if eco-friendly attitude is really important when they start considering vehicles, and technical innovations are really important to them as well. And then finally, when we look at getting down to some of the details, 75% of them will take up to 6 weeks to buy, and they'll visit at least 2 dealerships, and almost 60% will see the test drive as an important part of their purchasing decision, which is fairly high for most buyers. So that test drive is important. So again, just really good, interesting insights around the EV buyer. And then obviously there's a lot of data on what type of media they're consuming, but some of the favorites here you can see are things like they're on Instagram and Twitter when they're on their devices, and then professionally they're obviously in LinkedIn. And then when they're consuming other media on TV or streaming, you might find them on ESPN or Bravo, or consuming the news on CNN. So that just kind of gives you a good overview of the current EV buyer. But the question becomes, who's the next buyer, right? When scale happens, what will the next buyer look like? And this can be really important as you're starting to plan for product, as you're starting to plan for media, or whatever your role may be, or when you start looking at dealerships and trying to understand, well, where are these people? And so I'm going to walk you through an exercise on how you might want to identify those people. Because as I mentioned a little earlier, how do you know which of the 127 million households are going to be current buyers or upcoming buyers or never buyers, right? You want to understand, who's going to buy your brand. And so I'm going to take a quick step back to introduce Claritas a little bit. Some of you guys may be very familiar with Claritas, and some of you, Claritas may be new to you. And so Claritas is a company that's over 50 years old. We commercialize customer segmentation or audience building. We were the first to do so, and we're not only the oldest, but the largest and best at it. And so I'm going to talk about our scale a little bit. But over the last 50 years, obviously, we have evolved. In the last 10 years, especially, we've significantly increased and improved our technology and some of our other capabilities. The most important capability that we built was our identity graph. And just to keep things real simple, all an identity graph is if you had an unending Excel spreadsheet and every row was a consumer and every column was a variable, that is what an identity graph is. And inside that identity graph, and why it's so important, is historically we've always had consumers' names and their postal address. That's how we built segmentation at the household level. So we've identified every house in America and who they are, and I'll get into that in a second. But over the years, we added email. And then most recently, because of the devices and our ability to collect all that data, we now have their device IDs. So your digital ID, your social ID, your mobile app ID, and your IP address. And why that's so important is we went from collecting a lot of data to mind-blowing amounts of data. You can see here that we collect data from over 1 billion devices, which is 40 billion data points monthly. Now, once in a while, I try to think about how much data that really is. I can confidently say that in 1 month, we collect more data than we probably had the previous 40 years, because 40 billion data points is just astronomical. But having all this data just allows us to be so much closer to the consumer and really help not only define them, but reach them. And so we have this mantra here at Claritas that we really have the only full circle circus, sometimes it feels like a circus, the only full circle of intelligence-driven solutions, meaning whether we're trying to identify who your consumer is or go out and find them and deliver your messaging, whether it be in TV or digital, and then optimize all those efforts, through attribution and capabilities like that. But to me, the most important capability that we have, and I was a client of Claritas for over a decade before I came and worked for Claritas. And this slide is really the importance, because one of the things that I've heard from a lot of clients when they've done previous audience building or segmentation work is, we brought somebody in, they did really great work, but when they left, we didn't know what to do with it. And those words might ring true, because, like I said, you might have a really beautiful presentation, but how do you go buy digital media with a persona if you can't link back to it? And what Claritas and our longevity has allowed us to do is create these amazing partnerships. And so whether you're talking about merits data, in-moment data, which is a lot of that automotive specific research, or polk, or just basic consumer research like MRI, Nielsen, and Scarborough, all of the data that I'm showing you, everything from those EV buyers to the upcoming buyers and everything I'm going to show you here in a second, you can go out and buy directly at those people versus just trying to build a bridge or a workaround to reach them. And I think that's really important. So let's get back into our example. So let's say we want to find these next wave buyers. How do we go about doing it? And I'm going to keep this super simple. If you want to get into the weeds and dive deeper, more than happy to jump on another call. But I wanted to keep this to 30 minutes, and going through this process alone could take a little longer than that. But so I'm going to try to keep it simple. So I hope this is useful. So the first thing we need to do is identify what households, right, are going to be those next buyers. And to do that, you need to understand Prism Premier. So Prism Premier is our syndicated segmentation. This is our flagship product that we launched over 50 years ago. Today, we have a number of other different systems, but we're going to focus on this today. So basically how it works is there are some important variables that we use to identify households. First and foremost is income and age, technology usage, presence of children, home ownership, urbanicity, and what we call IPA, or income producing assets. And so we take these variables plus a few others. And I don't know if you've ever watched The Price is Right or seen a Plinko board, right? Is we take a household and we start them down this path. And as the household starts answering some of these questions of how much money do they make, what is their average age, and home ownership and things like that, they'll make it all the way down the board to the end where they'll get a unique code. So we have 68 different segments within Prism Premier. And so the household will get a number of 1 through 68, right? So once we're done with, so I just want to give you a little bit of background around the syndicated segmentation system we're going to use. But once we're done with that, we're ready to identify these households. So the first thing we want to do is identify a behavior. And then the second thing is an attitude. So for behavior, right, we're going to use polk data, right? So polk data will help us understand who's currently buying EVs, right? And who could potentially buy EVs. And so as we look at the 68 households over here, and this is just an example, I highlighted the households in red that make up households who buy EVs, right? So using polk data, we can understand who is buying. From there, we can move to attitudinal, right? And so as you saw from the EV example, people who are environmentally friendly or have that eco-friendly attitude or lifestyle, that is really important to someone right now who's buying EVs and looking at EVs. You can see that we can take people who are buying and also overlay this attitude, right? So we can identify these two variables, which will make them the most likely to purchase, right? And so we can take these variables and then group them together. And then once we group them together, we can run them through those tools that I was talking about through Polk and InMoment and MRI, and group them together so that we can build personas, which you can see here on screen. And these personas are really helpful, right? Because it helps us understand here in the upper left-hand corner here, you can see the market opportunity. It helps us understand the size of the potential of this target group in buying, which I'll show you here in a little bit. We can look at competitors and then basic demographics, understand, are they married, what their household income is, and look at what, from a geographical perspective, what DMAs they're in, and then look at what their table stakes or what's most important to them when buying a vehicle. And so this can be a nice overview for your internal consumers, right? The groups that you're working with to try to help them understand what you're trying to do if you're from a marketing perspective. And also from if you're on product or at a dealership, this could really help you understand. And I'm going to show you some mapping here in a second on how you can identify and find these people. And then you can get into some of the other things, the attitudinal overview of who they are, what hobbies they like, how they work out. And these variables are really important for if you're like I said, if you're trying to develop messaging or creative, or trying to understand from a product perspective, are these people who like to go skiing, for example? So do they want all-wheel drive, or do they need more room for their product? So cargo space is really important. So some of these variables are just good to really help define these consumers. But going back to our example, when we start, for example, look at household income, you can see from the EV perspective, from the core perspective, those early adopters, their household income was much higher at $217,000, right? Where the next wave consumers, or those early majorities, their household income is at almost $150,000. And while still high, much lower than the core. So price point and things like that are going to be important for these buyers. And then next, as we look at the household composition, when we look at married and children and house, you can see, for example, the core, right? Almost all of them are married, right? And 40% have children, which both are very high numbers, right? But when we look at the next wave, we can see that, while married, they have only a quarter of them have children. And so, you can, when you start thinking about what type of vehicles these two groups may want to buy, you can see, for example, the core may be looking at SUVs, things like that, where the next wave may consider an SUV, but may also want a sedan or smaller type of a vehicle. Again, just some things that you can think of as you start looking at the data and start understanding the consumers that you're looking at. And then finally, how do we go out and find these people? And I really love mapping. So all this data and all these things that I've just shared, you can look at it from a geographic perspective, because we start at the household level, which is really important to understand. And because we start at the household level, we can build it up to any geographies, right? And so I always love this example. So here we're looking at the Atlanta DMA. And let's say, you have a dealership, or you're looking at your dealership and you sell a lot of SUVs, and you're rolling out your new EV lines, and your performance may not be as strong across the EV models that you're selling. And you might be asking the question, well, why are we not being successful? And this is a question I get a lot from my clients that I work with. And so one of the first things we do is we map out, where are dealerships, and then where are the people who are most likely to purchase, where do they live? And here in this example, I'm using that core EV buyer. So if your dealership's here in the smack dab of the middle of the Atlanta DMA, right? And you can see from an SUV buyer perspective, there's a reason you're selling a lot of SUVs, is because the concentration of SUV buyers are right around your dealership. But as you look at here on the left, this map, around the core EV buyers, you can see that they're more scattered around the suburban areas of the Atlanta DMA. And so your tactics on trying to reach them may be different. And this may answer the question of why are we struggling? I was actually just working with a client on this, and they had questions around some of their dealerships. And with similar data, and a lot of times visually being able to see the results on screen like this can really be unearthing from an insight perspective. And then when we look at those EVs, the next wave of EVs, you can see that they make up about 20% of US households and 28% of the EV buyers, right? So they're less likely right now to be purchasing, but you can see at 1.4 times more likely to purchase. They're definitely starting to scale. If I would have looked at this, 2 or 3 years ago, they probably would have been under indexing. And so you could see that these next round of buyers are coming, right? And so again, just a simple example of just trying to show you how powerful this data is in trying to unearth and understand who the consumers are. But the way you drive that 2x, those 2x results is first going through this process of understanding who your consumers are, but then getting to this activation and then tracking those activities. And so, like I mentioned earlier, all this work that all these examples that I just gave you, and looking at those 68 different Prism Premier segments, you can take. So, for example, let's go back to that those early majority EV buyers. Let's say you've identified those Prism Premier segments and which ones they're buying. You can group them together or target them individually. And so, whether you're talking about digital media, you can actually place your media against those buyers, right? Which makes for a much more efficient buy and targeting exercise, because you know that all the work that you just went through to identify who's most important to you, and whether it be EV buyers or people most likely to buy a certain model of yours or your brand, being able to then go out and target specifically against those makes it much more efficient, and again, really drives the results that you're looking for. And then, so once we get through, the implementation and getting into the optimization, utilizing Prism Premier, for example, allows you to perform campaign tracking and attribution analysis, meaning when you place an ad in market, seeing those results. And I'm just going to show you a basic example of how that might work. So right now, your brand likely serves an ad, and we're talking about digital media here, serves an ad, places that ad somewhere on a site, right? And your agency may be using, or internal agents department may be using some type of demographics and in-market data to make that purchase. But from there, what most brands, where the disconnect starts, is you don't know who's coming to your website, right? So you get a lot of visitors, and you're hopeful that all this media that you're placing is driving people to your website. But the only thing that you might be able to do is say, okay, somebody just came to my website that may have clicked on an ad, so let's retarget them, right, with another offer or message. But you don't know, are they highly likely to purchase? Are they 3 or 4 times more likely to purchase? Or are these what we call drive-bys, meaning they may have seen an ad and wanted to come, they saw a model that looked cool and want to come customize it, but based off of their demographics and things like that, household income, and they may not be able to purchase, right? But you don't know any of that information, right? And so that's what this scenario is, what most brands are going through. But today's technology, and what we have here at Claritas, of what we call anonymous website visitor, we have the technology to be able to tag your ad, right, and understand, okay, what Prism Premier segment do they fall in, right? And you can go on, like we were just talking about, you go out and purchase that Prism Premier segment and overlay other demographics. And then, because we've tagged them with a special tag, anytime they, once they've seen your ad, anytime that they've come and visited your website, we will know that, right? And why that's really valuable is, not going back to what I was saying earlier, is they go from being an anonymous website visitor to somebody who we can say, hey, look at, Fred Smith just hit your website. We know that they're 2.2 times more likely to purchase based off of their demographics. So, that becomes a hot lead for your brand. So you can send that to your dealership or your internal marketing and say, hey, we need to send this person an offer immediately. And so that, that takes, your advertising from, being a good lead generator to really differentiating between someone who is a buyer today versus, just retargeting everybody in the same manner. And we just did a test where we looked at where we tagged the client site and went through this entire process, and we looked and we benchmarked it against an old audience versus the Claritas audience. And from an incremental website visiting perspective, you can see it nearly doubled here. And so as you start thinking about your goals and how much you may have missed it by last year, this could be the difference between hitting your numbers and having a great Jan 1 or December 31st versus scratching your head and wondering, well, how can we drive more volume? So I hope that helps. And then the final thing I wanted to touch upon today is AI and creative optimization. Now, I know there's a couple different camps around AI, but from a business and marketing perspective, it's coming, and it's coming fast. We just acquired one of the largest AI marketing providers out there, and less than 1% of brands are using AI to optimize their business, and they're especially when it comes to an advertising and reaching out to consumer perspective. And so I'm going to show you what is possible and why it could mean, again, hitting goal. So what is AI personalization? I like this diagram just because it makes sense to me, but right now on the left side, the dynamic creative optimization is current state. So basically, when people place, this is the highest level of technology prior to AI, is basically it's a rules-based targeting system where someone like myself will go in and give the creative and the audiences certain amount of rules. And it was a way to optimize, and it was the best way to optimize up until AI has come along. But the limitations with DCO, or dynamic creative optimization, is it's limited to how many rules you can give it, right? So there's only so many, there's only so much the human mind, and only so much time you have to give rules to a DCO. Whereas AI personalization, and I'm going to show you an example here, and this is a case study from a client from Kroger that we used, where we used 72 different versions of their creative that we placed digitally. And we used an enormous amounts of different audiences that we have available to us. And so when you take those 72 versions and then you take it times the number of audiences, the machinations is just, it's 133 million different opportunities to interact with consumers. And so basically the way the AI personalization works is when you place your creative and all these different audiences, instead of having it have human rules, the machine learning basically will go out and see how consumers are interacting with your ad and different versions of your ad. And when it sees, for example, a group of or audiences interacting better with, for example, this top left ad, it will start serving that ad up to those consumers within the market, which is just mind-blowing. And so when you think about just one little audience and across all these audiences, it's really the tail end of AI that really is the difference between success and not success. So for example, DCO, or the current state, is these first 4 or 5 cohorts is typically what the current market delivers. But with AI, it's this long tail, this ability to be able to go out and reach more consumers with different types of creative that those consumers find effective, drives this enormous amount of what we call long tail success and this incremental lift. And so for this campaign, you can see here the pre-period versus post-period, that they saw over a 200% overall improvement in visits to their site. And again, it's not that they built a better creative, it's that they could serve the creative to audiences at a much higher scale and a much more effective way. Hey, Jim. Yes. Yeah. So as you start thinking about that long tail, those audiences, yeah, they're definitely going to have a lower CPM, and it's going to be those audiences that you couldn't reach with your traditional, with your traditional buys. So great question.
So the question is it safe to assume that long tail audience targeting are also a lower CPM or CPC? So just in case, because I'm not sure that everybody can see the question.
Oh,
so.
sorry, I popped it up. I wasn't sure. Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks for that, Barb.
We want to thank everybody for coming, and we will be in touch.
Everybody have a great day. Thanks, guys.